Hello and welcome along. I'm Justin Briley of Premier Christian Radio, and we're into week 2 of the Atheist Prayer Experiment. What is the Atheist Prayer Experiment? Well, essentially we've invited 70 atheists to take time out each day to pray to God to reveal himself to them, and they're doing that each day for 40 days. You can find out more at premier.org.uk/Atheist Prayer Experiment. It's based on a philosophical paper by Oxford philosopher Tim Mawson called Praying to Stop Being an Atheist. And Tim's going to join me at the end of the experiment on my show Unbelievable to talk about it and the results. So look out for that towards the beginning of November. The webpage for the show is premier.org.uk/Unbelievable. Well, we're at day 10 of our 40-day experiment, and well, it's been interesting. A number of atheists have been recording their thoughts via blogs about what's going on as they continue to try to make contact with the God they don't actually believe in. Well, many are simply reporting at the moment nothing yet. Michael says, days 6 to 8 have been uneventful in prayer, nothing but silence, but had I the desire I could extrapolate and interpret countless events throughout the day as the will of God. Overlapping Magisteria says, I've continued praying daily and continued not to get any signs. This Sunday I prayed in a Catholic church. My wife is Catholic, so I tag along. It didn't feel any different than when I pray at home. I will say that praying is becoming a bit less awkward. It still feels like talking to a wall, but now I'm a bit more used to it. Oliver the Atheist says, so for me God is the seemingly unending and infinite interactions between all the matter, people and universe that there is. He's obviously a bit of a philosopher, and that means you can't pray to God, says Oliver. Instead, like swimming in a turbulent current, life is about finding out how to be swept to where you want to be. Well, he says, although I go into this experiment with the best of intentions, I hope God doesn't answer my prayer. If there's just a creator, that's rather boring. I much prefer my version of the world. It sort of raises a tricky question then, doesn't it? Because if you go into this experiment asking for God to reveal himself to you, but you really don't want God to reveal himself to you, should the desire you have match up with the prayer you have? Or aren't we really just praying, God, please don't reveal yourself to me if you go in? And I think that's a valid question to ask. What should we expect? What should the expectations be of the atheist taking part? Here's Kyle, who says, I'm of two minds regarding the silence I've received in response to my first few prayers. On the one hand, I'm glad to have at least one more day where I can honestly say that I have no good reason to believe a God exists. On the other hand, I'm not convinced that the material world is all there is, and I do find many aspects of Christianity appealing. There is part of me that wants God to answer, but I do think it would take a direct answer to convince me. Here's someone going by the pseudonym Friendly Atheist, and he's been contemplating, well, what if I did get an answer? Here's a few of his posts. Monday, he says, no fireworks, but I did become aware of my biases against Christianity. Some of my close friends are conservative evangelical Christians, and I would have to change my personality to take on those views, so becoming a Christian would be a big leap. Then on Friday, he says, I had a prayer and a 30-minute sit, went for a meal with one of our Christian friends, none of whom know that I'm doing this experiment, and talked about God for about 20 minutes. Can a non-believer choose to believe? Can a believer choose not to believe? The usual unanswerable questions. Then on Sunday, he says, I lied a bit in Friday's entry. I did have a revelation about God. I was reading the Bible in the pub and I became captivated by one of the stories. The timeless relevance of it reminded me of God being described as outside of time, and I wondered if God could merely be the message in the Bible. But can you believe in the biblical message without believing in God? And he goes on to say, well, if that was you, God, then thank you. I might not be there yet, but it felt as if a page had been turned. Here's another interesting participant, Harold. He's actually a student, but he's lost his faith, and his parents don't know, and his dad's actually the pastor of a church. Here's one of his recent posts. He says, today I had breakfast with my parents and then headed back to the town where my college is. As is a usual practice, my parents insisted on praying with me before I left the house. I went along with it, as I always do, but as my father was praying a blessing over my next school year, I realised one thing that I still appreciate about prayer, even though at this point it still feels awkward and silly when I try it. I appreciate being thought of. Prayer is the way Christians have each other's back. I have taken to telling people I'm thinking of them, and I see that as the same sentiment as when my mum texts me to say that she's praying for me. I didn't feel anything when I prayed today, but I realised I still believe community is important. Okay, time for one more. One participant, Paddy McGingersnap, who's regularly posting over at the Facebook group of the Atheist Prayer Experiment, well, she says she heard a voice in her head while she was praying. but whose? And I think she writes very honestly here. She says, I felt sad. I have depression, which is treated, but I've been ill this week, and that often aggravates it. A voice in my head seemed to speak. Would you like me to help your sadness? Yes, please. Be thankful. Was this God? I'm pretty sure the Christians reading this will be thinking, yes. Well, sorry guys, I don't think it was. I suppose it could have been, but I think it's far more probable that it was a part of me, a wise part to which I listen to far too infrequently. My conclusion from the experiment so far is that while I'm still an atheist, a few minutes meditation at the start of each day is a worthwhile habit. Well, if you want to follow the progress of some of those sharing their experiences on the Facebook group, then do go to facebook.com/groups/atheistprayerexperiment. To find out more about the whole thing, go to premier.org.uk/atheistprayerexperiment. I'm going to be back in a few days with another update. For the moment, I'm Justin Brierley, and thank you for watching.